Good night, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? I am going to talk about retainer sacrifice in ancient Kemet. So as you come in, if you're having any technical difficulties, let me know. So I'm going to go in to the document one time and read it. So I'm going to share my screen. And when I'm done, if anybody's interested, they can come in. So this is retainer sacrifice in ancient in Kemet and in Nubia. So Jacobus van Didje. So this gentleman is a Norwegian Egyptologist and a linguist. So he's qualified to talk about this, right? The truth of the doctrine of cultural or historical, it is the same thing. The relativism is that we can never apprehend another person, another people, or another period imagination as though it were our own. The falsity of it is that we can therefore never genuinely apprehend it at all. We can apprehend it well enough, at least as well as we apprehend anything not properly ours, but we do so not by looking beyond the interfering glosses that connect us to it, but through them. First footnote. Human sacrifice has long been and perhaps still is, a somewhat controversial subject among Egyptologists. The ancient Egyptians have often been considered too civilized for such a barbaric custom. As the Canadian anthropologist and archaeologist Bruce Trigger put it, I quote, the cruel forms of human sacrifice practiced by the Aztecs have caused many Egyptologists to wonder if such people can really be considered to have been civilized, end quote. Footnote 2. Inevitably, a famous episode from an early kingdom literary text, the Westcott Papyrus, is cited in this text, footnote 3. It is a collection of fairy tales set in a distant past, the time of the Old Kingdom pharaohs. One of the stories tells of the magical skills of a man called Jetty who is able to reconnect. Give me 1 second. So here's a footnote. C. C. Burchett found in translations on the social history of moral imagination and local knowledge. Further essays in Interpretive Anthology, New York, 1983, page 44. Footnote number 2. B.G. Trigger, Early Civilization, Ancient Egypt and Context, Cairo, 1993, page 84. Footnote 3. A.M. Blackman, The Story of King Tiap and the Magician Transparent from Papyrus, Westcott Burn, Papyrus, 3033. E.G. W.V. Davies, reading 1988. The text has often been translated. Recent English translations are available in Emblem Scott, Ancient Egyptian Literature, Berkeley, Los Angeles, and London, 1973. 215 to 222, and R.B. Parkinson, The Tale of Kinahu and Other Ancient Egyptian Poems, 1940 to 1640 BC. Oxford, 1997, 102 slash 27. Right. Can reattach a severed head and restore the victim to life? King Cheops, the builder of the Great Pyramids of Giza, is keen to have a demonstration of this and gives orders to fetch a prisoner and use him as a guinea pig. But Jetty tells the king it is forbidden to do such a thing to the noble cattle, I human beings. A duck, a goose, and a bull are then used instead. King Cheops is clearly depicted here as a barbarian who does not acknowledge the value of human. Now that is the personal opinion of this person. That is commentary. So let's keep that in mind. In modern popular imagination, the idea of the Nasut as a cruel despot is still very much alive in many a film or novel. The pharaoh, the Nasut has the people of British pyramids buried alive with him in order to ensure that nobody would disclose the secret of its construction and rob his tomb. And those people then also return as vengeful mummies risen from the dead. Of course, this is all nonsense. But on the other hand, it cannot be denied that the custom of having the king's servants killed and buried with him in order to serve him in the afterlife did actually exist in ancient Kemet, albeit only for a brief period at the very beginning, of pharaonic civilizations. Two forms of human sacrifice can be distinguished. On the one hand, there is a ritual killing of a human being, either as a regular or as an exceptional form of the orphan cult. In this case, human beings usually, though not always, convicted criminals or prisoners of war are sacrificed to the gods in order to maintain or establish cosmic order and to emphasize the role of the king as its main guarantor. In some cases, the type of human sacrifice may be no more than a ritualized form of the legal death penalty, but no four. On the other hand, there is the practice of a tenor sacrifice, where the death of the king is followed by the killing of people who are supposed to occupy him so they have to, but those five. It is on this latter custom that we still focus here, although it is possible that the two forms of human sacrifice may sometimes overlap. For example, if, as sometimes has been suggested, prisoners of war were selected to be killed on the occasion of the royal funeral. Footnote 6. So let me put it down for a second. I don't know if everyone is hearing me. So if you are having trouble hearing me, let me know. When you come in when you come in, let me know. So let me go back to reading the document. Footnote number 4. See for the various forms of cultic human sacrifice. H. T. Volt, this volume, chapter 7. Footnote 5. Sometimes rather inappropriately called sati burial after the Indian ritual of widow burning, CEGHU. Now, you know what? Forget about that. You're not reading that now. We'll go back over that later. The earliest instances of a saint sacrifice in Egypt appear to date from the first phases of Egyptian prehistory, particularly the Nakara II Gerzian period, circa 3500 to 3200 BC. In some cemeteries, there's evidence for dismemberment of the body, a burial custom not attested in earlier times. Parts of the body were buried or reburied separately. In a number of cases, the skull has been detached from the body, and in a tomb in Nakara, several skulls and long bones have been carefully laid out along the wall of the tomb. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, we'll get deep into this thing. So, um, this is very interesting to see what's happening here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to read it, and I'm going to then go back over the sources to see how many sources I can vet. Then I'm actually going to do a response paper on what I think of it. And we're going to go from there to see what responses I might get. Depending. So hopefully people will read it, and I will get some good responses. And I'll spark some good conversation in the community. So give me a minute. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second while I do something. And if anyone is interested, drop into the comment section. Let me know if you want to come on and have a discussion. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Most definitely, like, share, and subscribe. Right? You can share the live. I can share the live. We can all definitely share the live. Right? So let's do that. I'm going to give you some time to do that while I run my mouth a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, like, share, and subscribe. And I suppose at this point, I can like, share, and subscribe myself. So I'm going to share the live right now as well. Right? You can like, share, and subscribe as well. To tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend that Jose is on right now. doing a presentation on retainer sacrifice. They can come in and participate. Let them know right now that the boy is on live and he wants them to participate so he can have a great conversation. Right? He wants them to participate so he can have a great conversation. So I'm going to get back into the reading while you guys share. The earliest instance of a sacrifice from kemet appears to date back to the last phases. The last phases of Egyptian prehistory, particularly the Nakara period. In some cemeteries, there's evidence for dismemberment of the body, a burial custom not accessible to the earlier time. Parts of the body were buried or reburied separately. In a number of cases, the skull has been detached from the body. And it's seen in the collar, several skulls and long bones have been carefully laid out along the walls of the tomb. Evidence of post-mortem decapitation has recently come to light, not only at Heracanopolis, but also at nearby Adaima, where these two cases were to known where the victim had been decapitated after his throat had been slit. Footnote 8. These examples have been interpreted as cases of self-sacrifice and the beginning of the practice of retainer sacrifice. The caution is needed since the status and life of the victims remains unknown. Firmer and more substantial evidence of retainer sacrifice comes from the royal burial grounds of the early dynastic period. At Abdu, the kings of dynasties 0 and 1 were the centralized Egyptian state reform, as well as those of the second part of Dynasty 2 were buried here. The unification of the country under one central government is traditionally ascribed to Menes, the legendary first king of the First Dynasty, but although military operations may ultimately have played a decisive role, this unification is now usually seen as a result of a gradual process which took several decades. The identity of Menes, whose name does not appear in contemporary records, is still uncertain. He is most often identified either with Narmer, who's depicted as king of both Upper and Lower Egypt, on a famous slave palace from the Heracanopolis, now in the current year, and with his successor Aha. So what they're saying is talking about the Narmer palace, right? But be this as it may, retain a sacrifice in the necropolis at Abydos is first attested in the burial complex of King Aha, and this continues to be a feature of all royal tombs. Oh, it continues to be a feature of all royal tombs of the First Dynasty. The burial complexes of these kings consist not only of the tomb proper, an impressive mud brick structure built on the high desert, which was once covered by a rectangular tumula, but also of a separate funerary enclosure situated near the edge of the civilization. The necropolis has suffered extensively both from looting and from less than careful digging by early archaeologists. The work carried out a feature in 1899 to 1903 and 1922, and the excavations of the German and American missions presently working there have nonetheless yielded important results. Both the tomb and the funerary enclosure are surrounded by rows of small, square, or rectangular subsidiary graves, each containing one burial using a wooden coffin. The tomb of Aha has three parallel rows of 36 subsidiary graves containing the skeletal remains of young males, none of whom was older than 20 to 25 years. This uniform age is a strong indication that they were all killed simultaneously, apparently by strangulation. It is interesting to note that the remains of at least 7 young lions were found near one of these guys. Further confirmation of the practice of retainer sacrifice comes from the very recent excavation of Aha's funerary enclosure by the American mission. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I forgot to say this was in 2007. I'm actually going in chronological order to show you the earliest to the most recent. So I'm going to continue reading by the American mission. Here, the expedition uncovered six subsidiary burials containing the skeletons of what appears to be court officials, servants, and artisans. Although the graves have been looted, they still contain funerary goods such as jars, the royal seal of Aha, and precious items of ivory and lapis lazuli jewelry, indicating that these people were no military were persons of some standing. They were all buried at the same time. That they were all buried at the same time is made probable by the fact that the wooden roofs over the individual graves were covered by a continuous layer of mud plaster laid down over all graves very soon after the enclosure was constructed. Aha was succeeded by Jeddah, whose tomb was surrounded by the graves of no fewer than 317 individuals, while a further 242 were found buried around his funerary enclosure, and a total of 569 individuals, among whom were a considerable number of women. Many of these subsidiary graves are originally marked by simple tombstones inscribed with the names of their occupants, a further indication that these people were not just nameless slaves. Not all of the subsidiary burials are necessarily retained sacrifice. However, in the case of the burials at Genesis, Reisner, after careful consideration of the archaeological and conceptual evidence, considered 63 cases probable and a further 99 possible. So he's using words like probable and possible, which means he may not be sure. It just looks that way, in my interpretation. After Jenner, the numbers gradually decreased. Two of his successor, Jeddah Waji, had 174 subsidiary burials. This horizon is 14 probable and 99 possible cases of the same sex. The funeral enclosure counted a further 161. The tomb of Queen Myrni, who appears to have acted as regent during the minority of her son Den, contained 41, 33 probable sacrificial subsidiary graves, and Den's own tomb at 133, 40 probable, 83 possible, while his ritual enclosure, perhaps originally associated with Myrni's, counted 77. The tomb of the next king, and Jedid, was surrounded by 64 poorly constructed graves. His enclosure, if he had one, is yet unidentified. The last two kings to be buried in the first dynasty acropolis in Abydos Semerkhet and Qua. Semerkhet's tomb is particularly interesting in that the 68 subsidiary graves have been constructed directly around the king's own burial chamber and were almost certainly covered by the same roofing timbers as superstructure. A further strong indication that these burials were simultaneous with the royal funeral. Reisner considers all 68 burials as probable cases of the same size. Some of the retainers buried were dwarfed, as evidenced by skeletal names, as well as depictions on some of the seven skeletons found in the tomb. Semerkhet's funerary enclosure is unknown, although it has been identified with the so-called West Indian style, a building neighboring and similar to the enclosure of Den. If so, there do not seem to have been any subsidiary burials. Quartz tomb contained only 26 subsidiary graves itself, and were subsidiary graves which were again constructed around all the core of the royal tomb itself, and are therefore very probably all cases of attended sacrifice. The enclosure was not yet been identified. Elsewhere in Egyptian monumental funerary structures are also sometimes occupied by subsidiary graves of sacrifices in the early dynastic cemeteries of the capital Manasseh at Giza. As far as several cases have been found. At Nesnet Bakshan near Giza, 56 subsidiary graves were found around a large rectangular mud structure. The palace was surrounded by an enclosure wall. The so-called Mustaba Giza 5 dated by people to the reign of Jet Wadi. Give me 1 second. Well, I hope everybody's hearing me. I hope everyone is hearing me. I don't think I'm going to go on much longer. This is a heck of a lot of reading. Right. The interpretation of this master building is uncertain. It may be the tomb of Jet's mother or one of his wives, or possibly Asina, Asinata of, Jedi, of Jet himself. A symbolic tomb representing the king's continued presence in the north. The same problem arises with the huge palace design and the salvas of the full dynasty found by Emery. Emery believed these to be true royal tombs of the early rulers of Egypt, whereas he saw Tucci evidence as royal center plot. Sennac erected in the sacred domain of the god Star. A view still held by some scholars today. The size of the Sakura Mastaba, in particular, is an important argument. They are much larger and much more imposing than the tombs at Abydos. That is, if the funerary sources belonging to the latter are left out of the equation, this makes it rather unlikely that the Sakura Mastabas belong to higher systems even if they were royal blood themselves. For as Michael Hoffman has pointed out, it is hardly conceivable that they would have been allowed to outshine the king by the glamour of their funerary monument. There's much to be said for Hoffman's solution that at least some of the Sakura Mastabas are in fact the northern center, center of the king's bed at Abbey. Now here is where I think I'm going to lose off. Right? So I'm going to stop that. I'm going to leave that off there. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.